A millionaire finds a baby in a basket during a storm, but someone pushes him, making him fall into a river along with the baby. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The insomnia had been particularly cruel to Harrison Walker that night. For hours he had tossed and turned in his king-sized bed, watching the digital clock mock him as it displayed 3 a.m., then 4, then 5 a.m. When the first rays of sunlight began filtering through his curtains, Harrison finally surrendered the battle for sleep. At 45, the successful CEO cut an impressive figure even in his exhausted state. As he slipped into his tailored Italian suit, the mirror reflected a man with distinguished silver streaks at his temples and tired eyes that even his impeccable appearance couldn't disguise. His work as a corporate executive had given him everything he'd ever thought he wanted: money, status, recognition. But that morning, something felt different. Instead of following his usual routine of heading straight to the office, Harrison decided to do something he hadn't done in years: take a real walk, not on his imported treadmill, but through the streets of the city. He drove to the outskirts where the air was cleaner and the streets less crowded. Harrison parked near an old concrete bridge that crossed a small river, swollen from the previous night's rainfall. The location was practically deserted, except for a few birds singing in the nearby vegetation. Harrison breathed deeply, feeling the fresh morning air fill his lungs. That's when he heard it. At first he thought it was his imagination, a distant cry, almost imperceptible. But as he walked further onto the bridge, the sound became clearer. It was the cry of a baby. His heart raced when his eyes found the source of the sound. There, precariously positioned at the edge of the bridge, was a small wicker basket. Inside, wrapped in a thin blanket, was a baby who couldn't be more than 3 weeks old. The infant's tiny hands waved in the air as it cried. Harrison felt his blood run cold. The basket was dangerously close to the edge, threatening to fall into the raging river below with any slight movement. Without thinking twice, he approached. Carefully, his Italian leather shoes slipping slightly on the wet concrete as he tried to maintain his balance. He was just about to reach the baby when he felt a violent push from behind. The impact made him stumble forward, his hands instinctively grabbing the bridge's railing. For a terrifying moment, he thought he would fall. When he regained his balance, Harrison turned quickly to face his attacker. He saw a figure in a dark hoodie, face obscured, backing away rapidly. Before he could process what was happening, the figure fled, disappearing into the morning mist. Turning back to the baby, Harrison saw to his horror that the basket had shifted closer to the edge from the commotion. Moving with extreme caution, he reached out and secured the infant, pulling it safely into his arms. The baby was ice cold, its skin with a slightly bluish tinge from the morning chill. As Harrison cradled the tiny being against his chest, protecting with his own jacket, he noticed a folded piece of paper tucked into the basket. With trembling fingers, he unfolded it to reveal a hastily scribbled message: "Please protect her. They're looking for her." The sound of rushing water filled his ears as Harrison stared down at the vulnerable little life in his arms. Who would abandon a newborn like this? Who had pushed him? And who were they? What Harrison didn't know, as he hurried back to his car with the baby clutched protectively against him, was that this morning, which had begun as just another day of insomnia, would become the beginning of a journey that would transform not only his destiny, but that of many others. The hospital was bustling when Harrison rushed through the emergency doors with the baby in his arms. His elegant clothes, now wrinkled and damp, contrasted sharply with the sterile environment. A nurse ran toward him as soon as she saw him, her eyes widening at the sight of the infant's condition. "Please, she needs help," Harrison said, his voice betraying the nervousness he felt. "I found her tied in a basket near the river. There was a woman. She pushed me." The medical team acted quickly, taking the baby to an emergency room. Harrison tried to follow them, but was gently stopped by an older nurse who led him to a waiting area. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened," she said, taking out a notepad. As Harrison recounted the morning's events, he felt his throat tighten. The image of the baby tied to the basket, The hooded figure, the violent push. It all seemed even more surreal now under the fluorescent hospital lights. The nurse listened attentively, making occasional notes and nodding. "I'll notify the proper authorities," she informed him. "You'll need to wait here. They'll certainly want to speak with you." The following hours passed in a blur. Harrison canceled all his meetings that day, something he had never done before. His phone rang incessantly, but he barely registered the calls. His mind remained focused solely on the tiny being he had found that morning. It was past noon when a social worker approached him. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a serious expression. "Mr. Walker, I'm Regina Santos from Social Services. I'd like to discuss what happened this morning with you." Regina led him to a more private room where they could talk without interruptions. "The baby is stable now," she began, noticing the concern in Harrison's eyes. "She's dehydrated with mild hypothermia, but she'll make a full recovery. She's a girl, probably about 3 weeks old." Harrison felt immense relief at these words, but his concern quickly shifted to another aspect of the situation. "And the person who pushed me? Has anyone found her?" Regina adjusted her glasses and consulted some notes in her folder. "Yes, she was found still on the bridge and brought here. She's being treated in the psychiatric ward at this moment." She paused before continuing. "Her name is Meredith. She's 22 years old, and she appears to be the baby's mother." The revelation hit Harrison like a punch to the stomach. That disturbed young woman was the mother of the child? Regina, sensing his shock, continued explaining. "She has been missing for 3 weeks since the baby's birth. She developed severe postpartum depression that evolved into a state of profound mental instability. No one knew her whereabouts until today." The social worker opened a folder and showed Harrison an older photo of Meredith. In it, a beautiful, smiling young woman looked at the camera, her eyes bright and full of life. It was hard to believe this was the same person he had encountered on the bridge. "What will happen to them now?" Harrison asked, his voice laden with concern. "Meredith will remain hospitalized for psychiatric treatment. As for the baby..." Regina paused, her eyes filling with sadness. "We haven't located any family members who can take her. The father is unknown, and Meredith's relatives refuse to take responsibility." The silence that followed was heavy. Harrison thought about the small being he had rescued, so defenseless and alone in the world. The idea that she would be sent to an orphanage made his heart ache in a way he couldn't explain. Is there any possibility I could visit her?" he asked, surprising even himself with the request. Regina studied him for a moment, as if trying to understand his motives. "Well, technically visits are not allowed except for family members. But considering the circumstances," she paused thoughtfully, "perhaps I can make an exception." Minutes later, Harrison found himself in the pediatric ward, observing the baby through the glass of the incubator. She was clean now, dressed in a hospital gown and sleeping peacefully. A whirlwind of emotions overcame Harrison as he watched the gentle rise and fall of her tiny chest. A nurse quietly approached him. "Her name is Emma," she informed him, checking the medical chart. "She's responding well to treatment. She's a little fighter." Emma. The name echoed in Harrison's mind. Suddenly, that anonymous baby he had rescued had an identity, a story, however tragic it might be. And without Harrison realizing it, she had already claimed a special place in his heart. As he watched Emma sleep, an idea began to form in his mind. It was something completely out of character, something the Harrison of yesterday would never have considered. But today's Harrison, the man who had held that baby in his arms and felt the desperation of her mother, couldn't simply turn his back and continue with his life. He left the hospital that night with a decision made, even though he didn't yet know exactly how to accomplish it. He would find a way to help Meredith and Emma, even if it meant completely changing his structured, solitary life. On his way home, Harrison passed by the bridge where everything had happened. The place seemed different now, as if it held a dark secret. The rope that had secured Emma's basket still hung there, swaying gently in the evening breeze. Harrison felt a shiver run down his spine as he thought about what could have happened if he hadn't decided to take that morning walk. When he arrived at his luxurious apartment, For the first time in years, Harrison felt out of place. The expensive furniture, the artwork on the walls, everything seemed empty and meaningless in light of what he had experienced that day. He sat in his favorite armchair and remained there, lost in thought, until the sun began to rise again. He didn't know it yet, but this would be just the first of many sleepless nights ahead. His life, which until then had followed a perfectly planned script, was about to take a completely unexpected turn. Curiously, for the first time in a long time, Harrison wasn't afraid of this change. The next morning, Harrison awoke to the doorbell ringing insistently. He had fallen asleep in the armchair, still wearing his dirty suit from the previous day. When he opened the door, he found his secretary, Olivia, with a worried expression on her face. "Mr. Walker, what happened? You've never missed a meeting before, much less failed to answer my calls. Everyone is concerned." She was holding a folder full of documents that needed his urgent signature. Harrison invited her in, and for the first time in their 5 years working together, he shared something personal. He told her about the baby on the bridge, about Meredith and her condition, about how he couldn't get the situation out of his head. Olivia listened in silence, her eyes filling with tears. "You need to see this," she said, turning on the television. "TU." Was a news report about the incident. The images showed the bridge, interviews with hospital staff, and speculation about the case. Harrison felt his stomach turn when he saw that they had managed to get footage of Meredith being taken to the ambulance, her face contorted in an expression of deep anguish. "I need to go back to the hospital," he said, rising abruptly. "Olivia, can you reschedule my meetings? And please, no interviews or statements to the press." At the hospital, the atmosphere was different from the day before. There were reporters at the entrance trying to get more information about the case that was moving the city. Harrison managed to enter through a side entrance thanks to Regina's help. "I'm glad you came back," she said, leading him through the corridors. "Some things have happened that we need to discuss." Regina took him to her office and closed the door. "We've obtained more information about Meredith's history," she began, opening a folder on her desk. "The situation is even more complex than we imagined." According to the records, Meredith had been a brilliant student. She worked as an assistant in an accounting office and had plans to attend college. Everything changed when she became pregnant. The baby's father, upon learning of the pregnancy, simply disappeared. Abandoned and without family support, Meredith began showing signs of depression during her pregnancy. She lost her job in her 8th month, Regina continued. Her boss claimed that her performance had declined significantly. Without a salary, she couldn't pay the rent for the small apartment where she lived. She was evicted 2 weeks after Emma was born. Harrison felt his heart tighten with each new detail of the story. And her family? How could they simply turn their backs on her? Regina sighed heavily. Meredith's parents are simple people from a rural area. They have 5 other children to raise, and according to them, they can't carry this burden anymore. Those were their exact words. She closed the folder with a gesture of frustration. "I tried to argue, explained the situation, but they were unyielding." "And how is she? Can I see her?" "She's sedated most of the time. The doctors have diagnosed a severe case of postpartum psychosis, aggravated by the situation of abandonment and extreme stress she experienced." Regina paused. "But there's something you should know. In her more lucid moments, she asks about the baby. She cries a lot. Says she didn't want to hurt her, that the voices forced her to." Harrison felt a lump in his throat. The image of that young woman so lost and frightened on the bridge wouldn't leave his mind. "And what about Emma? How is she?" Regina's face softened a bit. "She's recovering well, in fact." She hesitated for a moment. "There's something I need to discuss with you. Since we haven't found any family willing to take custody, Emma will have to be sent to a shelter once she's discharged." "No." The word escaped Harrison's mouth before he could think. "There has to be another solution." "Well," Regina studied him for a moment, "there is the possibility of temporary guardianship by a third party. but it's a complex process that requires a series of evaluations and legal commitments. I want to try, Harrison replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. What do I need to do? The following hours were spent filling out forms and discussing requirements. Harrison discovered that he would need to undergo psychological evaluations, home visits, and prove that he had the conditions to properly care for a baby. But none of this discouraged him. I need to make it clear, Regina warned, that this would be only temporary. The goal is for Meredith to recover and be able to resume care of her daughter. Would you be willing to invest so much effort knowing that you'll have to return Emma when that time comes? The question caught Harrison by surprise. He hadn't thought about that. His initial impulse had been simply to prevent the baby from going to a shelter. But now, confronted with this reality, he realized that he needed to be honest with himself. I don't want to take anyone's place, he responded after a moment of reflection. I just want to give them a chance. Meredith needs time to recover, and Emma needs a safe place to wait for her. I can provide that. Regina smiled for the first time since they had met. You know, when you showed up here yesterday with Emma in your arms, I thought you were just another businessman wanting to do his good deed for the day. But you've surprised me, Mr. Walker. Before leaving, Harrison went to see Emma. The baby was awake this time, her large dark eyes observing the world with curiosity. When Harrison approached the incubator, she turned her little face toward him as if recognizing him. Hi, little one, Harrison whispered, placing his hand on the glass. You're stronger than you think, you know that? Just like your mom. And I promise I'll help you both, no matter what happens. That night, upon returning home, Harrison began making a list of everything he would need to buy and adapt in his apartment for Emma's arrival. Crib, diapers, clothes, bottles. It was a completely new world for him, but for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing something truly meaningful. His phone rang. It was Olivia informing him that the press wouldn't stop calling, wanting an interview with the hero businessman who had saved the baby. Harrison refused them all. He didn't want the spotlight. He didn't want to turn Meredith's tragedy into a spectacle. Lying in his bed, watching the city lights through the window, Harrison thought about how life could change in a matter of hours. 2 days ago, his biggest concern was closing $1 million contract. Now, all he could think about was a tiny baby and her mother, two lost souls that, for some inexplicable reason, fate had placed in his path. Sleep was slow to come, but this time, it wasn't his usual insomnia that kept him awake. It was the anxiety for what was to come, the fear of not being up to the challenge he had taken on, but mainly, it was the certainty that there was no turning back. His life had changed forever on that bridge, and now all that remained was to move forward. Even without knowing exactly where this path would lead him, the days that followed were a veritable roller coaster of emotions and challenges for Harrison. His apartment, previously an example of minimalism and organization, was now filled with bags of diapers, baby clothes, and an impressive amount of items he never imagined he would need. Olivia, his secretary, had become a fundamental ally in this transformation. She not only reorganized his entire schedule to accommodate hospital visits and meetings with social services, but also helped him research baby care and choose essential items. Are you sure you don't want a full-time nanny? She asked, watching him assemble the crib in what was previously his home office. I know you plan to work from home most of the time, but taking care of a baby alone isn't easy. Harrison paused for a moment, holding a part of the crib in his hands. For now, no. I want to try to do this myself. Of course, I'll need help at certain times, but he hesitated, searching for the right words. I feel like I need to create this bond with Emma, you understand? The truth was that Harrison was scared. Each visit to the hospital made him question whether he was prepared for this responsibility. He carefully observed the nurses changing. Diapers, giving bottles, burping Emma. He tried to absorb every detail, every tip, every recommendation. Regina, the social worker, appeared frequently to monitor his progress. On her last visit, She brought news about Meredith that left him even more apprehensive. "She's having better and worse days," Regina explained, sitting on Harrison's sofa. "The doctors have managed to adjust her medication, and she's more lucid. But that also means she's beginning to process everything that happened, and it's not being easy." Harrison felt his heart tighten. "Does she know I'm offering to take care of Emma?" Regina nodded slowly. "Yes, I talked to her about it yesterday. It was intense." She paused as if carefully choosing her next words. "Meredith cried a lot. She said she was a terrible mother, that she didn't deserve a second chance, that maybe Emma would be better off without her." "That's not true," Harrison protested, feeling a wave of protection for the young woman he barely knew. "She was ill, needing help, and no one was there for her." "That's exactly what I said," Regina agreed. "But it will take time for her to believe that. The trauma and guilt run very deep." She took something from her folder. "In fact, Meredith wrote something for you. She asked me to deliver it." It was a simple note written on a page from a notebook. The handwriting was shaky but legible. "Mr. Walker, I don't know how to thank you for what you're doing for my daughter. I know I don't deserve this kindness, not after what I did. The voices aren't here anymore, and now I can clearly see the horror of what almost happened. Please take good care of my little Emma. She's all I have in the world, even if I don't deserve to have her. Meredith." Harrison needed a few minutes to compose himself after reading the note. "Can I visit her?" he finally asked. "I'll talk to the doctors. If they think she's stable enough, we can try." The authorization came a few days later. Harrison prepared himself mentally for the meeting, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality. The psychiatric ward was a quiet, antiseptic place with walls in soft tones and locked doors. Meredith was sitting in a visiting room, wearing a hospital robe, her long black hair now clean and combed. When their eyes met, Harrison saw something different from the lost look he had witnessed that morning on the bridge. There was awareness there now, and with it, a deep pain that seemed to consume her entire being. "Hello, Meredith," he said softly, sitting in the chair across from her. "How are you?" She took a few seconds to respond, her hands nervously clutching the fabric of her robe. "Better, I think. The medications. They help keep the voices away." Her voice was low, almost a whisper. How is my daughter?" Harrison smiled, taking out his phone. "I brought some photos. Would you like to see?" He showed her the images he had taken of Emma in the hospital, her little face increasingly rosy and strong. "She's a very special baby, Meredith. So strong and full of life." Tears began to stream down the young mother's face. "She looks so good, so happy." Her voice broke. Maybe it's better this way. Maybe she should stay with someone like you, someone who can give her everything I never could." "No," Harrison interrupted firmly. "Don't say that. Emma needs her mother. I'm here just to help, to give you the time you need to recover, nothing more." Meredith raised her eyes, surprised by the firmness in his voice. "Why? Why are you doing all this for us? You don't even know me." It was a question Harrison had asked himself several times in recent days. "Because when I saw you on that bridge," he began slowly, "I didn't see a bad person. I saw someone who was suffering, who desperately needed help. And maybe I needed something like this in my life too. Something that would remind me that there's more to the world than contracts and meetings." The conversation continued for almost an hour. Meredith told him about her life before the pregnancy, her dreams of going to college, being abandoned by Emma's father. She spoke about how depression silently took hold, how the voices began to appear, first as whispers, then increasingly louder and more insistent. They said she was in danger, that I needed to protect her. Her voice trembled as, she recalled, that the only way to save her was. She couldn't complete the sentence, the tears returning in full force. Harrison felt an impulse to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay, but he knew he needed to maintain a certain distance. Instead, he offered a tissue and waited patiently for her to calm down. "Meredith, I want you to know something," he said when she seemed more controlled. "While you're here getting treatment, I'll care for Emma as if she were my own daughter, but I will never, ever try to take your place. You are her mother, and as soon as you're better, you can have her back." The look Meredith gave him then was one of pure gratitude mixed with what seemed to be a first glimmer of hope. It was a beginning, Harrison thought. A small step on a long journey to recovery. As he left the hospital that day, Harrison felt emotionally exhausted but also more determined than ever. He had made a promise, not just to Meredith, but to himself as well. He would do everything in his power to help this small family rebuild itself. The arrival of Emma at Harrison's apartment was a moment of profound transformation. The businessman had spent the last few days preparing every detail, from the ideal room temperature to the positioning of the crib, following all the recommendations he had obsessively researched. Regina personally accompanied the transfer of the baby from the hospital to her new temporary home. "Remember," she said as she helped Harrison settle Emma in the crib, "you have my number and the support teams. Anything at all, don't hesitate to call, no matter the time." The first nights were the most difficult. Harrison, accustomed to his methodical sleep routine, now found himself waking every 3 hours to feed Emma. The baby's crying, sometimes inconsolable, left him in a state of constant anxiety. Was he doing something wrong? Was Emma sick? Every little hiccup or sneeze became a cause for concern. Olivia, noticing her boss's state of exhaustion, decided to intervene. On a particularly difficult morning after a night when Emma had cried, for hours straight she arrived earlier than usual, bringing with her a kindly older woman. "This is Mrs. Clara," Olivia introduced. "She raised 5 children and worked as a nanny for more than 20 years. I thought perhaps she could give us some tips." Harrison, who would normally resist the idea of a stranger interfering with his routine, was desperate enough to accept any help. Mrs. Clara observed for a few minutes as he unsuccessfully tried to soothe Emma. "You're too tense," she said gently. "The baby feels that, you know. You need to relax a bit." With smooth, experienced movements, she took Emma in her arms and began massaging her tiny tummy. "See, she has colic. It's normal at this age." In the hours that followed, Mrs. Clara taught Harrison a series of techniques to calm the baby. Correct positions for bottle feeding, signs to identify different types of crying. It was precious knowledge passed down from generation to generation that no book or website had managed to convey. "You're doing very well," she said before leaving. "You just need to trust yourself more, and remember, babies are more resilient than they seem." That visit marked a turning point. Harrison began to feel more secure in his role as caregiver, although there were still moments of doubt and fear. His apartment, once an example of sophisticated minimalism, was now filled with colorful toys, blankets, and the sweet smell of baby powder. His visits to Meredith continued regularly. At each meeting, he brought new photos and videos of Emma, sharing small moments and progress. The young mother, still fragile but visibly more present, drank in each piece of information with a mixture of joy and sadness. She gave her first smile today, Harrison recounted during one of these visits, showing a video he had managed to capture. In it, Emma's little face lit up in a toothless smile, bringing tears to Meredith's eyes. "I wish I could be there," she whispered, touching the screen with trembling fingers. "I'm missing so many important moments." "You're not missing them. You're preparing," Harrison gently corrected. "Each day here is an investment in the future for both of you. And meanwhile, I'm recording everything so you won't miss anything." Meredith's treatment was progressing slowly. The doctors had managed to establish a more precise diagnosis and adjust her medication, but the path to recovery was long and full of ups and downs. There were days when she seemed almost like her old self, talking about her plans for the future with Emma. On others, the guilt and depression returned with full force, leaving her prostrate and silent. On a particularly difficult afternoon, Meredith had a crisis during Harrison's visit. "I don't deserve this second chance," she repeated between sobs. "I'm a monster. How could a mother do what I did?" Harrison's heart tightened seeing her in that state. "Meredith, look at me," he asked firmly. "You are not a monster. You were a young woman, abandoned by everyone, fighting against an illness that no one noticed or wanted to help treat. What happened wasn't your fault." As he tried to comfort Meredith, Harrison couldn't help but think about how poorly society still dealt with mental health issues. How many other women were going through similar situations, alone and without support. Meredith's story could have had a tragic ending if he hadn't decided to take that morning walk. Back at the apartment that night, Harrison watched Emma sleep in her crib. The baby had grown so much in the last few weeks, her features becoming more defined, resembling Meredith's. Her little hands moved during sleep, sometimes letting out small sighs of contentment. It was then that Harrison had an idea. The next day, he requested a meeting with Regina to discuss a proposal that had been maturing in his mind. "I want to help create a support program for mothers in vulnerable situations," he explained. "Something that offers not just financial assistance but also psychological and social support, so that no other Meredith has to go through what she did." Regina listened attentively as he detailed his plan. He would use his contacts and resources to establish a network of professionals and volunteers, create a welcoming space, offer courses and job opportunities. "It's an ambitious project," she commented when he finished. "It will require a lot of time and dedication. Are you sure you want to take on this additional responsibility?" Harrison looked at Emma, who was playing on her activity mat, and smiled. "You know, Regina, before meeting Meredith and Emma, I lived only for work. I thought success was measured by the size of your bank account or the number of deals closed. Now, I know there are much more important things." That night, as he prepared Emma's bottle, Harrison reflected on how his life had completely changed in such a short time. His days were now a mix of business meetings via video conference, frequently interrupted by a baby's cries or laughter, diaper changes, hospital visits, and planning for the new project. It was an exhausting routine, completely different from the organized and predictable life he had led before. But for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing something truly meaningful. Each smile from Emma, each small progress from Meredith was confirmation that he was on the right path. What Harrison didn't know yet was that fate had more surprises and challenges in store. His commitment to Meredith and Emma would be tested in ways he could never have imagined, forcing him to question not just his decisions, but everything he thought he knew about love, family, and redemption. Harrison's project to help mothers in vulnerable situations was beginning to take shape, but not without facing obstacles. On a particularly hectic morning, while trying to feed Emma and participate in a video conference simultaneously, he received a call that would change the course of events. "Mr. Walker." Regina's voice sounded tense on the other end of the line. "We need to talk urgently. There's been a complication with Meredith." Harrison's heart froze. In recent weeks, Meredith had shown significant progress in her treatment. What could have happened? "She tried to escape from the hospital last night," Regina continued, her voice heavy. "She was determined to see Emma. When they found her, she was in a state of profound agitation, repeating that she needed to protect her daughter from something." Harrison felt his blood run cold. "Is she okay? Did she hurt herself physically?" "She's okay, but..." Regina made a painful pause. "The doctors had to increase her medication. She had a severe relapse, Harrison. She's having hallucinations again." The news hit Harrison like a punch to the stomach. After so much progress, how could this be happening? He canceled all his commitments for the day and rushed to the hospital, leaving Emma in Olivia's care. The psychiatric ward seemed darker than ever. Meredith was in an observation room, sedated. Through the glass, Harrison could barely recognize the young woman who, in recent weeks, had begun to show signs of her former personality. "What happened?" he asked the doctor in charge. "Dr. Robert," a gray-haired gentleman with a tired expression. "We believe it was a combination of factors," he explained. "Meredith was doing well, but that also means she was more aware of everything that happened. The guilt, missing her daughter, the fear of not being a good mother. All of this was building up. The doctor consulted his notes before continuing. Last night, one of the patients in the room next door had a crisis screaming about babies. This seems to have triggered something in Meredith. She began saying she needed to save Emma, that she was in danger. Harrison observed Meredith through the glass, his heart heavy. And now what happens? We'll need to reevaluate the entire treatment, Dr. Robert replied. This means the hospitalization time will be extended and… He hesitated, as if carefully choosing his next words. We'll need to suspend visits for a while. No. Harrison protested immediately. She needs to know she's not alone, that Emma is okay. I understand your concern, the doctor said gently. But at this moment, any stimulus related to the baby could worsen her condition. We need to stabilize her first. Harrison left the hospital feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. On the way home, he pulled over at a park and let the tears he'd been holding back finally fall. How would he explain this to Meredith when she got better? How would he keep his promise not to leave her alone if he couldn't even see her? At home, he found Olivia cradling Emma. The baby, oblivious to all the drama unfolding, smiled and babbled happily. How is she? Olivia asked, immediately noticing Harrison's devastated expression. He told her everything, his voice breaking at several points. Olivia listened in silence, still rocking Emma gently. You know what hurts the most? Harrison said after finishing his account. It's knowing she's there alone, probably feeling abandoned again, after everything I promised. You're not abandoning anyone, Olivia stated firmly. You're respecting her treatment, and meanwhile you're taking care of the most important person. In Meredith's world. That night, after putting Emma to bed, Harrison spent hours in his office researching relapses in cases of postpartum psychosis, trying to better understand what was happening with Meredith. The information was frightening. Many women went through multiple relapses before recovering completely. Some took years to resume a normal life. The days that followed were a test of emotional endurance. Harrison continued receiving daily updates on Meredith's condition through Regina, but not being able to see her or show her photos of Emma was torture. Each medical report was an emotional roller coaster. Sometimes she seemed to improve. At other times, she would have intense crises. A week after Meredith's relapse, Harrison received an unexpected visit. It was Sandra, Meredith's former boss at the accounting office. She had seen a news report about the case and, after much hesitation, decided to seek him out. I can't stop thinking that I could have done something, she confessed, sitting in Harrison's living room. I noticed Meredith wasn't well during her pregnancy, but I thought it was normal, you know? Stress, hormones. Her voice faltered. When her performance started to decline, instead of trying to help, I fired her. Harrison felt a mixture of anger and compassion. How many people had failed Meredith? How many had seen the signs and chosen to look the other way? I came because I want to help, Sandra continued. She pulled an envelope from her purse. When Meredith gets better, I want to offer her job back, with better pay and flexible hours so she can take care of the baby. It was a small ray of hope amid the storm. Harrison thanked Sandra and promised to stay in touch. That visit made him realize that even in the darkest moments, there was still room for redemption and second chances. The support center project for mothers continued advancing, now with even greater urgency. Harrison had secured a building that would be renovated to house the project, and professionals from various fields had already volunteered to help. This is how we'll honor Meredith's struggle, he explained to Regina during a planning meeting, by ensuring other women don't have to go through what she did. But the nights held their own afflictions. When everyone had gone home and the apartment was silent, except for the soft sounds of Emma's breathing in her crib, Harrison would find himself thinking about Meredith, imagining her alone in her hospital room, fighting against her inner demons. Did she think she had been abandoned again? Did she still believe that one day she could have her daughter back? During one of these sleepless nights, Harrison began writing a diary for Meredith, recording each important moment of Emma's life, each small achievement, each smile. It was his way of keeping alive the promise that she wouldn't miss anything, even if she couldn't be physically present. Dear Meredith, he wrote on one of the pages, Today, Emma tried to roll over by herself for the first time. She didn't quite manage it, but her determination reminded me of you. She has your strength, you know. And just as she doesn't give up trying, I know you won't give up on getting better either. We're here waiting for you for as long as it takes. What Harrison didn't know was that those words, written in the silence of the night, would one day be fundamental to reconnecting Meredith with everything she had lost during her darkest period. But for now, all he could do was continue one day at a time, keeping alive the hope that at some point, this shattered family might be reunited. The months passed with an agonizing slowness. Emma grew each day, beginning to develop her own personality. She smiled frequently now, especially at Harrison, and her curious eyes followed every movement around her. But for Harrison, each new development brought with it a pang of sadness, reminding him of everything Meredith was missing. On a particularly difficult morning, while trying to get Emma to accept a vegetable puree, Harrison received a call that made his heart stop. It was Dr. Robert, Mr. Walker. The doctor's voice sounded grave. We had a more complicated situation with Meredith last night. She had a more severe crisis than the previous ones. Harrison felt his blood freeze. What happened? She managed to access a phone and tried calling several people looking for Emma. When the nurse found her, she was in a state of profound agitation, saying she needed to save the baby from bad people who wanted to take her away forever. Guilt hit Harrison like a punch to the stomach. Was he one of those bad people in Meredith's disturbed mind? Was he unwittingly contributing to her suffering? We need to be honest here, Dr. Robert continued. Meredith's condition is more complex than we initially assessed. The relapses are becoming more frequent and intense. We're considering transferring her to a clinic specialized in more severe cases. No, Harrison protested. That would be like abandoning her again. There must be another solution. The doctor sighed heavily. I understand your concern, but we need to think about the best treatment for her. And also, he made a significant pause, we need to consider Emma's future. Those words hit Harrison like lightning. What do you mean? Social services are beginning to question whether Meredith will be able to resume custody of Emma in the near future. They may suggest initiating a process of termination of parental rights. Harrison felt the world spin around him. How had things come to this point? How could he allow them to take from Meredith the only thing that kept her fighting? I won't let that happen, he declared firmly. There must be something we can do, other treatments, alternative therapies, anything. After hanging up the phone, Harrison spent hours researching on the internet, looking for similar cases, different treatments, specialists in postpartum psychosis. He was so absorbed that he didn't even notice when Olivia entered his office. You need to see this, she said. On the television was a report about the support center for mothers that Harrison was building. The story showed the building under renovation and interviewed some volunteers. But what caught his attention was a testimony from a young mother who had overcome postpartum depression. If I had had help from the beginning, she said, maybe I wouldn't have hit rock bottom. What was missing was someone who understood, who didn't judge me, who helped me see that I wasn't alone. Those words lit a spark in Harrison's mind. Maybe that's what Meredith needed, not just medications and therapy, but a support network of people who truly understood what she was going through. With renewed determination, he began making calls, contacting mental health specialists, support groups, mothers who had overcome similar situations. One of these calls connected him with Dr. Helena Mendez, a psychiatrist specializing in severe cases of depression and postpartum psychosis. Meredith's case is complex, said Dr. Helena after analyzing her entire history. But it's not impossible. I've seen equally severe cases that had a complete recovery. The secret is finding the right approach. The doctor suggested a complete change in treatment. Beyond medication, Meredith would need intensive therapy, support groups, and most importantly, an environment that made her feel safe and welcomed. The problem is that each relapse makes her feel more guilty, more inadequate as a mother, Dr. Helena explained. It's a vicious cycle that we need to break. In the following days, Harrison reorganized everything. He obtained authorization to transfer Meredith to the clinic where Dr. Helena worked. The place was different from a traditional psychiatric hospital, with green areas, communal spaces, and a more humanized approach to treatment. But the most significant change was yet to come. One afternoon, while watching Emma play with her colorful blocks, Harrison had an idea that could change everything, or completely destroy the fragile balance they had managed to build. "I need to talk to you," he said to Regina when she came for her weekly follow-up visit. "I have a proposal, but it will require a lot of coordination and professional support." Regina listened attentively as he explained his plan. When he finished, she remained silent for several minutes, clearly weighing all the risks and possibilities. "It's risky," she finally said. "Very risky." She looked at Emma, who had fallen asleep on the activity mat. "But it could also be exactly what Meredith needs to recover." The following days were ones of intense preparation. Harrison completely transformed one of the rooms in his apartment, following all of Dr. Helena's guidelines. He hired a nurse specialized in mental health to be present 24 hours a day, and installed discreet but efficient security systems. The hardest part was convincing all the professionals involved. Many were against it, arguing the risk was too great. Others feared the legal implications if something went wrong. But gradually, with the support of Dr. Helena and Regina, the resistance was overcome. "We're not talking about a common home internment," Harrison explained during a meeting with the medical team. "We're creating a controlled environment where Meredith can begin reconnecting with her daughter in a safe and supervised way." The plan was bold: bring Meredith to live in his apartment where she could be near Emma, but with all the necessary professional support. She would have her own space, completely adapted to her needs, and the approach to the baby would be done gradually and in a controlled manner. "If it works," said Dr. Helena, "it could be a fundamental step in her recovery, to see that her daughter is well, that she hasn't been abandoned, that there's still hope. But if it goes wrong..." She didn't need to complete the sentence. Everyone knew the risks. A relapse under these circumstances could be catastrophic. But Harrison was willing to try. He had promised Meredith he wouldn't abandon her, that he would do everything to keep her connected with Emma. It was time to honor that promise, even if it meant risking everything. What he didn't know was that his decision would trigger a series of events that would test not only his determination, but also his ability to keep his own emotions under control. The line between helping Meredith and becoming too involved in her recovery was beginning to grow dangerously thin. The day of Meredith's transfer arrived, laden with apprehension. Harrison had barely slept the night before, checking each detail of the room prepared for her countless times. The walls had been painted in soft tones, the windows equipped with discreet protective screens, and every potentially dangerous object had been removed. Rose, the mental health nurse Harrison had hired, arrived early to make the final adjustments. "Remember," she said as she organized the medications in a locked cabinet, "in the first few days, contact with Emma will be extremely limited and always supervised. We can't risk an emotional overload." Olivia had taken Emma to spend the day at her house, following Dr. Helena's guidance. The idea was for Meredith to have time to adapt to the new environment before any contact with the baby. When the ambulance arrived, Harrison felt his heart accelerate. Meredith was different from the last time he had seen her, thinner with deep shadows under her eyes, but her eyes seemed more present. She walked slowly, supported by Dr. Helena, observing everything around her with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Welcome, Meredith," Harrison said softly, maintaining a safe distance as he had been instructed. "I hope you feel comfortable here." She looked at him for a moment before averting her gaze, her hands nervously clutching the small bag she carried. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. Dr. Helena led her to the room, explaining each aspect of the new arrangement. "This is your space, Meredith. You'll have privacy but also support. Rose will always be nearby for any need." As the doctor continued with the explanations, Harrison observed Meredith's reactions. She seemed to absorb each word with attention, although her body language demonstrated tension. Her eyes occasionally wandered around the environment as if looking for something or someone. "Emma," she suddenly asked, looking at Dr. Helena. Is she here?" The doctor exchanged a quick glance with Harrison before responding. "Emma is fine, Meredith. But remember what we discussed. We'll do this step by step calmly. First, you need to settle in here, get accustomed to the new routine." Meredith nodded slowly, but Harrison could see the disappointment in her eyes. His heart tightened, knowing how much she must be suffering, being so close and yet so far from her daughter. The first days were an exercise in patience and caution. Meredith spent most of her time in her room, coming out only for meals and therapy sessions with Dr. Helena, who came twice a day. Rose kept a meticulous record of her behavior and mood. Emma, in turn, seemed to sense the change in the environment. She was more restless than usual, crying without apparent reason. Harrison divided himself between trying to maintain the baby's routine and monitoring Meredith's progress, always attentive to any sign that things might be getting out of control. On a particularly difficult night, Harrison woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. He found Meredith standing at the door to Emma's room, which was locked according to the security protocol. She wasn't trying to open it, just standing there, one hand resting on the wood, silently crying. "Meredith?" he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned slowly, tears running down her face. "I heard her crying," she said in a choked voice. My heart hurts so much when she cries." Rose appeared at that moment, alerted by the monitoring system. "Let's go back to your room, Meredith," she said gently, approaching. "Tomorrow will be a new day." That scene haunted Harrison for days. During one of Dr. Helena's visits, he expressed his concern. "I don't know if we're doing the right thing. It seems so cruel to keep them apart when they're so close." The doctor observed him seriously. "I understand your concern, Harrison, but we need to keep the focus on the final goal. Each step needs to be taken safely. A relapse now could be devastating for everyone." On the 10th day after Meredith's arrival, something unexpected happened. During breakfast, she addressed Harrison directly for the first time. How is she?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Does she still smile a lot?" Harrison felt a lump in his throat. "Yes, she smiles. A lot. Especially when she plays with that colored rattle, the blue one with stars." Meredith interrupted, her eyes lighting up for a moment. "It was her favorite before." Her voice faltered and she lowered her gaze, but Harrison saw something different there. A connection, a memory that wasn't loaded only with pain. That small interaction was a turning point. In the following days, Meredith began asking more questions about Emma, always carefully, as if testing the limits of what she could handle. Dr. Helena allowed Harrison to show some recent photos of the baby, always in a controlled environment and during therapy sessions. Meredith's reaction to the photos was intense, but different than they had feared. Instead of the emotional breakdown they were concerned about, she showed a mixture of controlled joy and sadness, touching the images with trembling fingers and asking about every detail. "She's so big," she whispered, observing a photo of Emma playing with her blocks. "Her eyes are still like her father's." It was the first time she had mentioned Emma's father. Harrison and Dr. Helena exchanged significant glances but didn't press the issue. Each voluntary revelation was a small step toward healing. Meredith's progress, although slow, was consistent. Her therapy sessions began to address not just the trauma of the bridge incident, but also the circumstances that had led her there. The abandonment, the untreated depression, the social isolation. "You know what scares me the most?" she confided during a particularly intense session. "It's not the voices anymore. It's the fear that even if I get better, I'll never be a good mother for her, that this moment on the bridge will haunt me forever." Dr. Helena worked intensively with Meredith on these fears, helping her understand that her illness didn't define her as a mother. Gradually, a new narrative began to form, not of the mother who almost committed the unthinkable, but of the woman who, even in her most difficult circumstances, never stopped loving her daughter. But the real test was yet to come. After 3 weeks of consistent progress, Dr. Helena announced it was time to begin preparation for the first controlled meeting between Meredith and Emma. The news, though expected, fell like an emotional bomb in the apartment. What no one knew was that this meeting would bring to light feelings and truths that would fundamentally change the dynamic between all involved, leading them to a point of no return in their already complex story. The preparation for the first meeting between Meredith and Emma was meticulously planned over an entire week. Dr. Helena intensified the therapy sessions, working with Meredith to strengthen her emotional control. Rose kept an even more detailed record of her reactions, especially after sessions where they viewed photos of Emma. "We need to be absolutely certain she's ready," Dr. Helena explained during a meeting with the entire support team. "A rushed encounter can undo all the progress we've achieved so far." Meredith, for her part, alternated between moments of extreme anxiety and periods of forced calm. Harrison observed her trying to maintain control, her hands trembling as she compulsively folded and refolded the edges of the blanket during sleepless nights. "What if she doesn't recognize me?" she asked one night during dinner. It was one of the rare occasions when she sat at the table with Harrison, though she barely touched her food. What if she's afraid of me?" Harrison felt his heart tighten. "Emma is a good baby, Meredith. She can sense when people love her, and nobody loves her more than you." The words seemed to touch something deep in Meredith. She raised her eyes, meeting Harrison's for the first time in days. "You've been so good to her, to both of us. Why? I can't understand." The question caught Harrison by surprise. For a moment he questioned himself about his motivations. Why had he become so involved? Why hadn't he simply handed Emma over to the authorities that day and continued with his life? Maybe I needed this too," he finally answered. "My life before was so empty, full of professional success but without real meaning. You and Emma showed me that there's something more important." A heavy silence settled between them, laden with unspoken emotions. It was Rose who broke the moment, entering to administer Meredith's nighttime medications on the eve of the scheduled meeting. The tension in the apartment was palpable. Dr. Helena had chosen the living room as the ideal location, a neutral but familiar environment for Emma. All potentially dangerous objects had been removed, and discreet cameras had been installed. "For monitoring, the meeting will be brief," the doctor instructed. "No more than 15 minutes. Meredith will sit on the sofa, and Rose will bring Emma to her. Harrison and I will be present, but we'll maintain distance to give space to the bond between mother and child." That night, Harrison had difficulty putting Emma to sleep. The baby seemed to sense the different energy in the environment, being more agitated than normal. As he rocked her, Harrison found himself whispering, "Tomorrow is a very important day. Little one, you're going to meet someone who loves you more than anything in the world." Morning arrived with an atmosphere of apprehension. Meredith had barely slept, her dark circles more pronounced than usual. Her hands trembled so much that Rose had to help her dress and comb her hair. "Breathe deeply," the nurse guided. "Remember everything we practiced. If you feel it's becoming too intense, use the breathing techniques." At 10 o'clock sharp, everyone took their places. Meredith sat on the sofa, her hands nervously clutching the fabric of her skirt. Dr. Helena positioned herself discreetly in a corner, ready to intervene if necessary. Harrison stayed near the door, his heart beating so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Rose appeared carrying Emma, who was particularly beautiful in a light blue outfit. The baby looked around with curiosity, her large dark eyes absorbing every detail of the environment. When Rose began approaching the sofa, time seemed to slow down. Meredith held her breath, her entire body tense like a violin string about to snap. Emma, in turn, fixed her gaze on her with surprising intensity for a baby her age. Then something happened that no one expected. Before Rose reached the sofa, Emma extended her little arms toward Meredith, making that characteristic sound babies make when they want something or someone. The sound broke something inside Meredith. Tears began to run down her face, but they were different from the tears of despair everyone had witnessed before. There was something more there, a deep primitive emotion that transcended any words. "My baby," she whispered, her voice choked. "My little one." Rose, after a quick confirmatory glance at Dr. Helena, approached more, allowing Emma to be within Meredith's reach. The baby immediately grabbed a lock of her mother's hair, as she used to do when she was a newborn. The gesture, so simple yet so significant, made Meredith release a contained sob, her hands trembling as she touched Emma's little face for the first time, as if she couldn't believe she was real. Harrison observed the scene with a lump in his throat. There was something sacred about that moment, something that went beyond any planning or medical protocol. It was the reunion of two souls that, despite all adversities, had never truly been separated. The planned 15 minutes turned into 20, then 30. Dr. Helena allowed the meeting to extend, noticing that Meredith maintained surprising control over her emotions. She talked sweetly with Emma, telling her stories, softly humming lullabies she kept in her memory. The baby, in turn, seemed completely at ease, playing with Meredith's fingers, smiling at her, even briefly falling asleep in her arms, a moment that made everyone present hold their breath. When it finally came time to end the meeting, Meredith surprised everyone once more. Instead of the desperation they feared, she handed Emma to Rose with a calm resignation. "Thank you," she said, looking at each person in the room. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Later, during the post-meeting evaluation session, Dr. Helena couldn't hide her satisfaction. "It was much better than we expected. The connection between them is impressive, and Meredith's emotional control was exemplary." But something else was happening, something no one had foreseen. The meeting hadn't just reconnected Meredith with Emma. It had awakened memories and feelings she kept deeply buried, and these memories would begin to emerge in the following days, bringing to light truths that would forever change the course of their story. In the week that followed the first meeting between Meredith and Emma, a subtle but significant change began to manifest in the apartment. Meredith, previously so closed in her own world of guilt and fear, started showing renewed interest in her environment and the people around her. During meals, she no longer limited herself to pushing the food around on her plate in silence. She asked questions about Emma, wanting to know details about her routine, her likes, her daily little achievements. More than that, she began sharing fragments of her own memories from the time she cared for her. She always loved baths, she commented one morning while listening to the happy sounds of Emma playing with water in the bathroom. In the first weeks, it was the only time she was completely calm. Her voice faltered for a moment, and Harrison noticed she was struggling to continue. But then the voices started saying I could hurt her, that it wasn't safe. Rose, who was always attentive, immediately approached with a glass of water and Meredith's medications. But to everyone's surprise, she refused with a gentle gesture. "It's okay," she said, breathing deeply as she had learned in therapy sessions. "I need to talk about this. I need to understand, to remember." Dr. Helena, when informed about this episode, saw it as a promising sign. "Meredith is beginning to process her traumas," she explained during one of her visits. "It's an important, though painful, step." The meetings with Emma, now happening 3 times a week, gradually became longer and more natural. The baby showed a special joy in her mother's presence, as if somehow recognizing in her something familiar and deeply important. It was during one of these meetings that Meredith began revealing more about her past. She was playing with Emma on the living room floor under Rose's discreet supervision, when suddenly she became very quiet, observing her daughter with a different intensity. "She has her father's eyes," she said softly, more to herself than to others. "The same eyes that made me believe in empty promises." Harrison, who was working on his laptop in a corner of the room, looked up in surprise. It was the first time Meredith had voluntarily mentioned Emma's father, Michael. Meredith continued, still absorbed in Emma's features. "He was a teacher at the school where I cleaned to pay for my night courses. Always so kind, so attentive. Or at least I thought. He was. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted Emma's little outfit, but her voice remained controlled. When I told him I was pregnant, he changed completely. Said I was trying to ruin his life, that he was married, had a reputation to uphold. The revelation hit Harrison like a punch to the stomach. This man hadn't just abandoned Meredith. He had deceived her from the beginning, taking advantage of her youth and vulnerability. I tried to find him after Emma was born, she continued, silent, tears streaming down her face. Not for me, but because I thought my daughter deserved to know her father. He threatened me, said if I kept insisting, he would make sure I lost my job. Rose made a motion to interrupt the account, concerned about Meredith's emotional state. But Dr. Helena, who had arrived silently during the conversation, made a gesture for her to wait. That's when everything started to fall apart, Meredith whispered. The desperation, the loneliness, the voices. They said Emma was doomed, that she carried a curse because of her father, that I needed to save her. Her voice faltered, and for a moment, everyone feared she would have a crisis. But Meredith, surprising them all once again, breathed deeply and continued, her voice firmer now. I know the voices were just the echo of my own fear and abandonment. They weren't real. What's real is the love I feel for my daughter. As if to confirm her words, Emma chose that moment to let out one of her contagious laughs, grabbing Meredith's finger with her little hand. The gesture seemed to anchor Meredith in the present, pushing away the shadows of the past. Dr. Helena took advantage of that moment of lucidity for a therapeutic intervention. How do you feel now, Meredith, sharing this story? Meredith considered, the question for a moment, still gently playing with Emma. It's different than I imagined. It hurts, but not in the same way as before. It's like cleaning a wound so it can heal properly. That improvised session marked a new chapter in Meredith's treatment. In the following weeks, she began speaking more openly about her experiences, not just with Dr. Helena during formal sessions, but also in small moments throughout the day. Harrison, for his part, felt increasingly emotionally involved in this story. Meredith's courage. In facing her demons, her determination to recover for Emma touched something deep in his heart. One night, while watching Meredith rock Emma during one of their supervised meetings, he realized his feelings had surpassed simple compassion or desire to help. There was something more there, something that both frightened and attracted him at the same time. I need to stay focused, he told himself later, alone in his room. I'm here to help her recover, to ensure Emma has her mother back, nothing more. But fate had other plans. Meredith's revelations about her past had triggered a series of events that no one could have foreseen, and soon everyone would be forced to face even deeper truths and even more difficult decisions. What no one knew was that this moment of apparent progress was about to be severely tested. A shadow from the past was approaching, threatening to destroy all the delicate balance they had managed to build. The tranquility they had achieved was shaken one seemingly ordinary morning. Harrison was in his office participating in a video conference when he heard a scream coming from the living room. Running there, he found Meredith in a state of profound agitation, pointing at the television. On the screen, a local news report showed a photo of Michael, Emma's father, in front of the school where he worked. The story was about an educational project he was developing, portraying him as a dedicated and exemplary teacher. His words about transforming young people's lives sounded like a cruel irony. Rose was trying to calm Meredith, who was trembling violently. "He's so close," she repeated, her face as pale as paper. All this time he was so close. Dr. Helena was urgently called. Upon arrival, she found Meredith in a state of extreme anxiety, but still maintaining a certain control, a significant improvement compared to her previous crises. "Meredith," the doctor began softly after they managed to seat her on the sofa, "let's work with this. What exactly is frightening you right now?" Meredith breathed deeply several times before responding. "It's not fear, not exactly. It's anger, an anger I didn't know I still had inside me. Seeing him there, pretending to be this wonderful person, while her voice faltered. while I struggled to survive alone. Yes, Dr. Helena said gently, while you faced everything alone. Yes, Meredith whispered. And now that I'm starting to get better, starting to believe I can be a good mother to Emma, seeing him there makes me feel so small again. Harrison, who was observing the scene with a heavy heart, felt a wave of indignation growing inside. Him. How could that man continue his life normally, being celebrated as an example while he had destroyed the life of a young woman who trusted him? Dr. Helena, perceiving the tension in the environment, decided to transform that moment into a therapeutic opportunity. Meredith, you're having a completely normal reaction. The anger you're feeling is legitimate. The important thing is how you choose to deal with it. In the hours that followed, they worked intensively to process those emotions. Meredith, although visibly shaken, displayed an inner strength that surprised everyone. She didn't have hallucinations, didn't try to hide in her room, didn't ask for an increase in medication. I want Emma to be proud of me, she said at one point. Not for what happened in the past, but for what I choose to do now. Those words touched Harrison deeply. That night, after Meredith finally managed to sleep, he met with Dr. Helena in his office. We need to do something, he said, barely containing his indignation. That man can't just continue his life as if nothing happened. The doctor observed him carefully. Harrison, I understand your outrage, but we need to be careful. Any hasty action can negatively affect Meredith's treatment. But she deserves justice, he insisted. Emma deserves to know that her mother wasn't alone, that someone fought for her. What exactly are you thinking of doing? Asked Dr. Helena, her tone cautious. Harrison hesitated. In truth, he hadn't thought of anything specific. His reaction was more emotional than rational. I don't know, maybe. Maybe we could expose the truth, show who he really is. And do you think Meredith is prepared to face the consequences of a public exposure? To see her personal story being debated by strangers? To possibly be questioned and judged? The doctor's words hit him like a bucket of cold water. She was right, of course. In his desire to protect Meredith, he had almost forgotten what was most important: her well-being and recovery. In the days that followed, Meredith surprised everyone with her resilience. Although still visibly shaken by the discovery, she maintained her routine of therapy and meetings with Emma. In one of these moments with her daughter, she made a revelation that no one expected. You know, she said as she watched Emma play, with her colorful blocks. For a long time, I thought I needed an explanation from Michael, a justification for what he did. But now I realize that nothing he could say would change what happened. What matters is what I choose to do from here on. Harrison, who was present at the moment, felt his heart accelerate at those words. There was a maturity there, a strength that went beyond simple medical recovery. Meredith was truly transforming, finding her own voice. But not everything was progress. The nights became particularly difficult. Meredith had frequent nightmares, waking up frightened and calling for Emma. Rose, always vigilant, was there to calm her, but everyone could see that something deeper was happening. It's as if a door had been opened, Meredith explained during a session with Dr. Helena. It's not just the memories of the bridge or the hospital anymore. It's all the small humiliations, all the moments when I felt powerless and alone. The doctor nodded understandingly. It's normal for these memories to surface now that you're stronger to deal with them, but you don't need to face them all at once. It was during one of these difficult nights that something unexpected happened. Meredith had had a particularly intense nightmare, and Harrison, hearing her sobs, couldn't keep his distance. He found her in the kitchen, where Rose was trying to get her to drink a calming tea. "Can I stay with her a bit?" he asked the nurse. Rose hesitated, but something in Harrison's look made her agree, though she remained nearby. "Do you want to talk about the nightmare?" he asked softly, sitting at the table. Meredith clutched the teacup tightly, as if seeking support in its warmth. "It wasn't exactly a nightmare. It was a memory of the day I found out I was pregnant. I was so scared, but also happy you." "No, I thought when I told Michael he would be happy too, that we would be a family. Her voice faltered, and Harrison had to control the impulse to hold her hand. You deserved that, Meredith. You deserved to have someone by your side. And now I have, she said, raising her eyes to meet his. You, Dr. Helena Rose, you are more family to me and Emma than Michael ever was. Those words, spoken with such simplicity and truth, created a moment of deep connection between them. For an instant, all barriers, patient and caregiver, mother in recovery and temporary guardian, seemed to disappear. It was Rose who broke the moment, gently reminding that it was time for Meredith's medication. But something had changed. Something subtle but significant. A mutual understanding. A recognition that the bonds they had created went beyond their initial circumstances. What no one could have predicted was that this new dynamic was about to be severely tested. The past, which seemed to finally be processed and overcome, still had one last card to play, one that would test not only Meredith's newfound strength, but also the growing feelings Harrison struggled to keep under control. The morning began with news that no one expected. Regina, the social worker, arrived earlier than usual, her face carrying an expression of concern that immediately alerted Harrison. We need to talk, she said, after making sure Meredith was still in her room. Something happened that could complicate our situation. Seated in Harrison's office, Regina explained that Michael, Emma's father, had discovered about the incident on the bridge and the current living arrangement. Apparently, someone from the school where he worked had recognized Meredith from the old news reports and informed him. He has filed for custody, Regina said, her voice heavy. He claims that as the biological father and a stable person, he has better conditions to raise Emma than a mother with a history of mental health issues. Harrison felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. He can't do this, he protested, his voice trembling with contained anger. He abandoned Meredith when she needed him most, never showed any interest in Emma. He can't just appear now and legally he can, interrupted Regina gently. And his argument about Meredith's mental condition, as cruel as it may be, could have significant weight in court. Dr. Helena was immediately called for an emergency meeting. While they discussed the implications of this new situation, Rose kept Meredith occupied with her physiotherapy session, completely unaware of the storm that was forming. We can't hide this from her, stated Dr. Helena after hearing all the details. Meredith has shown remarkable strength in recent weeks. Trying to protect her from this reality could be more harmful than beneficial. But how are we going to tell her? Questioned Harrison, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. She's finally progressing, finally beginning to reconnect with Emma. Precisely because of this, responded the doctor. Meredith is not the same person we found on that bridge. She has tools now, has support. Our role is to help her face this in a healthy way. The conversation with Meredith was scheduled for that afternoon, after her regular meeting with Emma. The team decided it would be better to let her have this moment of connection with her daughter before receiving news that could shake her world again. During the meeting, Harrison couldn't take his eyes off the scene unfolding before him. Meredith was sitting on the floor with Emma, reading a children's story. Her voice, once so hesitant, now flowed naturally as she made different voices for each character, drawing delightful laughs from the baby. How could anyone want to separate this mother from her child? How could Michael, who had never shown the slightest interest in Emma, now try to destroy this bond that was being so carefully rebuilt? When the time came to tell her, everyone gathered in the living room. Meredith, still smiling after spending time with Emma, immediately perceived that something was wrong. What happened? She asked, her smile disappearing gradually. Why is everyone here? Dr. Helena took the lead, explaining the situation in the clearest and most direct way possible. As she spoke, everyone observed Meredith attentively, prepared for any reaction. To the general surprise, Meredith remained extraordinarily calm. Her face had lost its color, and her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was firm when she finally spoke. He wants to take my child from me, she said, not as a question but as a statement. After all this time, after all the harm he did to me, now he wants to take away the only good thing I have in my life. Meredith, Regina began gently, we're going to fight this. You've made incredible progress in treatment, have demonstrated an incredible commitment to your recovery. It's not fair. No, it's not fair, interrupted Meredith, and for the first time her voice trembled. He destroyed me, made me believe I was special, that he loved me, and then treated me like I was garbage. And now that I'm finally rebuilding myself, then something extraordinary happened. Instead of disintegrating into a crisis as everyone feared, Meredith stood up, her eyes shining with fierce determination. I won't allow it, she declared, her voice gaining strength. I won't let him do this to us. If he wants a fight, I'll give him a fight. But this time I'm not alone. Harrison felt his heart swell with pride and admiration. This wasn't the same Meredith he had found on that bridge, lost and broken. This was a woman who had found her inner strength, who was ready to fight for what was rightfully hers. You're right, he said, standing up as well. You're not alone. We'll face this together. Dr. Helena observed the scene with a mixture of concern and approval. Meredith, your strength is admirable, but we need to be sure you can handle the stress of this situation without compromising your recovery. Doctor, Meredith responded, turning to her. For the first time in a long time, I feel truly empowered and present. It's not the voices speaking. It's not fear controlling my actions. It's me, the real me, fighting for my child. In the days that followed, a new routine was established. Beyond the regular therapy sessions and meetings with Emma, Meredith began working with Regina and a team of lawyers to prepare her defense. Every progress in her treatment was documented, every small victory recorded. Harrison, meanwhile, felt increasingly emotionally involved. Seeing Meredith fighting with such dignity and courage only intensified the feelings he was trying to keep under control. But now wasn't the time for that. Emma and Meredith needed him focused, strong, ready to help in the battle that was coming. What no one could predict was that this battle would be just the beginning. Fate still held one last twist, one that would test not only Meredith's newfound strength but also the deep bonds that had formed between all of them. The news of the custody battle reached the press faster than expected. Within days, Meredith and Emma's story was back in the newspapers, but this time with a different angle. The sensationalist headlines that once focused on the bridge baby now explored the drama of the custody dispute. Michael, taking advantage of the situation, began giving interviews portraying himself as a repentant father who just wanted a chance to do the right thing. His wife, an elegant and articulate woman, appeared by his side talking about how they could offer a stable environment for Emma. How can he do this? Meredith asked one morning, looking at the newspaper someone had left on the table. On the front page was a photo of Michael and his wife in front of the school where he worked. Under the headline, Teacher seeks redemption and fights for custody of his daughter. Redemption? Her voice trembled with indignation. He doesn't even know what color his own daughter's eyes are. He's never changed a diaper, never spent a sleepless night with her. Harrison, who was observing the scene with a heavy heart, approached carefully. Meredith, you don't need to read this. These people don't know the real story. But that's exactly why I need to read it, she responded, surprising him. I need to know what we're facing. I can't hide from reality anymore. Dr. Helena, when informed of this episode, saw it as a positive sign. Meredith is developing healthy coping mechanisms, she explained during a meeting with the team. Instead of running away from emotions or experiences, she's facing them head-on. Instead of succumbing to paranoia, she's processing information objectively. The first court hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and the tension in the apartment was palpable. Meredith dedicated herself even more intensely to her recovery, determined to prove she was fit to care for Emma. I need to document everything, she told Harrison one night after putting Emma to bed, a privilege now allowed to her under supervision. Every moment, every progress, every smile. I want the judge to see that I'm not just a woman with mental health issues. I'm a mother fighting to get better for her daughter." Harrison watched in admiration how Meredith maintained her composure even in the most difficult moments. When Michael's lawyer sent a report questioning her mental capacity, she didn't succumb to despair as everyone feared. "They can say what they want about my past," she declared during a session with Dr. Helena. "But they can't deny my present. They can't deny the love that Emma and I share." It was during this period that something unexpected happened. Sandra, Meredith's former boss, appeared at the apartment one afternoon, visibly nervous. "I saw the news," she said, sitting in the living room with Meredith and Harrison. "And I can't stay silent. I need to tell what I know about Michael." What Sandra revealed in the following hours left everyone shocked. Michael hadn't just abandoned Meredith. He had actively tried to destroy her reputation at work, spreading rumors about her behavior and pressuring Sandra to fire her. "He showed up at the office several times," Sandra recounted, her voice laden with guilt. "He said Meredith was unstable, that she was making up stories about him, that it was better for everyone if she was let go. And I believed him. I regret it so much." Meredith listened to everything, silent tears running down her face. When Sandra finished, she took a deep breath before speaking. "Thank you for telling the truth," she said. This means a lot to me." Sandra took her hands, squeezing them tightly. "I'll testify, Meredith. I'll tell everything to the judge. It's not much, but it's the least I can do to try to fix the harm I helped cause." That night, after everyone had retired, Harrison found Meredith on the balcony, looking at the city lights. She seemed lost in thought, but there was a serenity in her expression that intrigued him. "How are you?" he asked softly, joining her in night contemplation. "You know what's strangest?" she responded without taking her eyes off the horizon. "Hearing Sandra today should have left me angry, with more resentment, but instead I felt free." "Free? Yes." She turned to him, her eyes shining with a clarity that left him breathless. "Free because finally, someone confirmed it wasn't all my imagination, that I wasn't crazy when I said Michael was trying to destroy me. It's as if a last chain had broken." Harrison felt his heart race with her proximity, with the strength emanating from her words. More than ever, he needed to control the impulse to take her in his arms, to protect her from all the harm the world had caused her. "You're amazing, you know that?" The words escaped before he could contain them. "Your strength, your determination. Sometimes I wonder who's really helping whom here." Meredith smiled, a genuine smile that illuminated her face in a way he had never seen before. "We're a team, aren't we? You, me, Emma. Even if, in the end, I have to follow my own path, I'll never forget what you did for us." Those words, though spoken with affection, hit Harrison like an arrow. Her own path. The idea of Meredith and Emma leaving his life caused a pain he wasn't prepared to feel. "Yes," he replied softly. When you win this battle, when you prove you can care for Emma on your own, you'll have to find your own space, restart your life." The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken emotions, feelings both were struggling to keep under control. The night breeze blew gently, bringing with it the distant cry of Emma in her crib. "She's calling," said Meredith, already turning. "To go inside. I think it's time for her medicine for colic." Harrison watched her leave, his heart divided between admiration for the strong woman she had become, and the growing fear of losing her, of losing them, forever. What he didn't know was that fate still had one last card to play, a revelation. That would completely change the course of that story, testing not only Meredith's newfound strength, but also the increasingly deep feelings growing between them. The day of the final hearing arrived with an almost palpable tension in the air. Meredith had spent the previous night with Emma, rocking her to sleep while softly humming a lullaby. Harrison observed from the door, his heart heavy with the possibility that this moment could be one of the last between mother and daughter. Morning brought an unexpected surprise. Sandra hadn't come alone to testify. With her were 3 other former employees of the accounting office, all with similar stories about Michael's persecution of Meredith. "We couldn't let her face this alone," said one of them, embracing Meredith with tears in her eyes. "We stayed silent for too long." The courtroom was packed when the session began. Michael and his wife occupied one side of the room, he in his impeccable suit, projecting an image of respectability that made Harrison's stomach turn. On the other side, Meredith sat upright, wearing a simple but elegant outfit that Olivia had helped choose. Michael's lawyer spoke first, painting a calculated picture of his client as a repentant man who had made mistakes in the past but now wanted to do the right thing. He presented reports on Michael's financial stability, his reputation at the school, the healthy family environment he could offer Emma. When it came time to question Meredith, he was merciless. "Miss, can you guarantee you'll never have another psychotic episode? Can you guarantee your daughter will be safe in your care?" Meredith breathed deeply before answering, her voice firm and clear. "What I can guarantee is that I undergo regular treatment, that I have a professional support network, and that every decision I make is with my daughter's well-being in mind. Unlike your client, who never showed the slightest interest in Emma until he discovered I was vulnerable." A murmur ran through the room. Michael's lawyer, momentarily disconcerted, tried to change tactics. "And regarding the incident on the bridge, how can we be sure something like that won't happen again?" It was Dr. Helena who answered this question, presenting a detailed report on Meredith's progress. What happened on that bridge was the result of an untreated medical condition, aggravated by abandonment and social isolation. Today, Meredith not only recognizes her condition, but actively works to keep it under control. The witnesses were called one by one. Sandra and her former colleagues recounted in detail how Michael had manipulated the situation to isolate Meredith, how he had actively tried to destroy her. Rose described the young mother's dedication during treatment, how she had never missed a therapy session, how her connection with Emma had strengthened in a healthy and positive way. Then came the moment everyone feared. Michael himself was called to testify. He maintained his performance as a repentant father for a few minutes, until Meredith's lawyer began his questioning. "Mr. Michael, can you tell us what your daughter's favorite color is?" Michael hesitated. "Well, she's very small, to have preferences, and the name of the teddy bear she can't sleep without?" Another embarrassed silence. "How about something simpler? Do you know if she has any allergies? Have you ever participated in any of her medical appointments?" With each unanswered question, the facade of devoted father began to crack. The final blow came when the lawyer presented old emails exchanged between Michael and Sandra, in which he explicitly threatened to ruin Meredith's reputation if she continued causing problems. During the trial recess, Harrison found Meredith in the courthouse corridor, sitting alone on a bench. He approached cautiously, sitting beside her. "How are you feeling?" "Strangely calm," she answered, a small smile playing on her lips. "You know what I realized today, seeing Michael up there? That I'm not afraid of him anymore. I don't feel shame anymore. For the first time, I see him exactly as he is, a small man trying to appear bigger than he really is." Harrison felt his heart swell with pride and something more, something he dared not name. "Meredith, She gently placed a finger on his lips. "I know, I feel it too, but now is not the time." When the session resumed, the judge was ready to give his verdict. The entire room held its breath as he adjusted his glasses and began to speak. "This case," he began, "is not just about the custody of a child. It's about truth, about responsibility, about the real meaning of parental love." He paused, looking directly at Michael. "Sir, you have shown no real interest in your daughter until she became a convenient tool to reach her mother. Your past and present actions demonstrate a pattern of manipulation and control that this court cannot ignore." Turning to Meredith, his tone softened. "As for you, ma'am, your journey is a testimony to the power of maternal love and the strength of the human spirit. You faced your condition with courage and determination, always putting your daughter's well-being first. The silence in the room was absolute when he finally announced, "Therefore, it is the decision of this court to grant full custody of Emma to her mother, Meredith, with the condition that she maintain her regular treatment and the professional supervision already established." The room exploded in subdued applause. Meredith, seated in her chair, let tears flow freely down her face, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. That night, after all the papers were signed and congratulations received, Meredith and Harrison were again on the balcony of the apartment. Emma slept peacefully in her crib, oblivious to the battle that had been won in her name. "And now?" Harrison asked, trying not to let the fear show in his voice. Meredith turned to him, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. Now we're going to do it right. I'll continue my treatment. I'll go back to studying. Sandra offered my job back with flexible hours so I can take care of Emma. Are you going to move?" The question he so feared finally escaped. "Eventually," she answered softly, "but not now. Now, if you you'll allow it, I'd like us to build something new. Not out of gratitude or obligation, but because what happened between us, this connection we created, is too real to ignore." Harrison felt his heart race. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel—" "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," she interrupted. "You weren't just a safe harbor in the storm, Harrison. You were the first person who really saw me, not as a victim, not as a charity case, but as myself. And the more you saw me, the more I could see myself too." In that moment, under the starry sky, Harrison finally allowed himself to do what he had wanted for so long. He pulled Meredith into his arms, embracing her with all the love that had grown in his heart. She returned the embrace with equal intensity, and both knew that this wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. From the next room came the soft sound of Emma's laughter during sleep, as if even in her dreams, the little one knew that her family, though different from what anyone could have imagined, was finally complete. And so, on an ordinary night that became extraordinary, three souls that fate had united in the most unlikely circumstances discovered that sometimes the strongest love isn't born from fairy tales, but from the battles we fight together, the falls from which we rise, and the courage to believe that even after the darkest of nights, the sun always returns to shine. The transition to their new life together wasn't without challenges. Harrison's corporate board was surprised, to say the least, when he announced he would be scaling back his involvement in daily operations to focus on his newfound family and the mother support center that was nearing completion. "Are you sure about this, Walker?" asked George, the head of the board, during a private meeting. "I understand you've been through something extraordinary, but this is the company you built from the ground up." Harrison looked out the window of the boardroom to the city below, the same view he'd once valued above all else. "I'm more certain about this than anything I've ever done, George. I'm not abandoning the company. I'm just putting it in proper perspective." Back at the apartment, now truly a home, Meredith was having her own adjustments. After her official release from medical supervision, she had begun taking online courses to finish her accounting degree, while working part-time at Sandra's office. The balancing act of motherhood, work, and studies was challenging, but deeply fulfilling. Dr. Helena continued visiting regularly, not just as Meredith's psychiatrist, but increasingly as a friend and mentor. "What you two have accomplished is remarkable," she told them during a dinner celebration marking 3 months since the court decision. "Not just Meredith's recovery or Emma's well-being, but the example you're setting with the support center, the Metropolitan Mother's Haven, as they had named it, opened its doors in early spring. The building Harrison had purchased had been transformed into a warm, welcoming space, offering everything from mental health services to job training, childcare, and temporary housing for mothers in crisis. Meredith had become the heart of the project, her personal experience giving her an authenticity and empathy that resonated deeply with the women who came seeking help. Many were in situations eerily similar to where she had been, abandoned, desperate, with nowhere to turn. I see myself in each of them, she confided to Harrison one night, after a particularly emotional day at the center. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been walking on that bridge that morning. Harrison pulled her close, feeling once again the strange mix of terror and gratitude that accompanied thoughts of their beginning. Let's not think about that. We can't change the past, but we can help shape a better future for others. Their peaceful reconstruction was interrupted one afternoon when Regina arrived with news that jolted them back to reality. Michael has filed an appeal, she said without preamble, sitting heavily on their sofa. He's claiming new evidence about Meredith's condition. The familiar cold fear gripped Meredith's stomach, but it was different now. No longer paralyzing, but galvanizing. What kind of evidence? Regina hesitated. He's somehow obtained partial medical records from your initial hospitalization. Out of context, some of your statements could appear concerning. Harrison felt a surge of protective anger. That's confidential information. How could he possibly? We suspect someone at the hospital was paid off, Regina admitted. We're investigating, but right now we need to focus on the legal response. That night, after Emma was asleep, Harrison found Meredith sitting in the nursery, watching their daughter's peaceful breathing. I won't let him take her, she said quietly, not turning around. I've come too far, fought too hard. Harrison knelt beside her chair. We'll fight. This together just like before. He didn't win then and he won't win now. The following weeks brought a flurry of legal activity. Their lawyer, Catherine, was confident but cautious. The judge's ruling was sound, and your progress is well documented, she assured them. But we need to be prepared for Michael to fight. Dirty, he's embarrassed and vindictive. She wasn't wrong. Soon tabloid stories began appearing with anonymous sources claiming Meredith had manipulated the court, that she was still unstable, that Emma was in danger. Each headline was a knife to Meredith's heart, but she refused to be diminished by, "Some years ago this would have destroyed me," she told Harrison after a particularly vicious article. But now I know who I am. These words can't touch that. Her strength was tested further when, during a routine visit to the center, she came face to face with Michael's wife, Claire, who had volunteered under a false name. I just wanted to see for myself, Claire said when confronted, her voice surprisingly devoid of malice. Michael talks about you like you're some kind of monster, but what I see here, she gestured around at the mothers being helped. This doesn't match what he's told me. Meredith studied the elegant woman before her, seeing not an enemy, but another, victim of Michael's manipulations. Your husband is very good at creating narratives that serve his purposes, she said carefully. I learned that the hard way. Claire's eyes showed a flicker of recognition. He's become obsessed with winning this case. It's not even about Emma anymore. It's about beating you, proving he can. The conversation might have continued, but one of the mothers needed Meredith's help with an urgent housing issue. When she returned, Claire was gone, leaving only a business card with a handwritten note. Call if you need me. Harrison was concerned when Meredith told him about the encounter. It could be a trap, some kind of setup to make you look bad. Don't think so, Meredith said thoughtfully. I think she's beginning to see the same pattern I did just years earlier in the cycle. As the date for the appeal hearing approached, their lawyers discovered something that changed everything. Michael had been investigated previously for an inappropriate relationship with another student at a different school, years before meeting Meredith. The case had been quietly settled and records sealed, evidence of his predatory pattern. This is the break we needed, Catherine said triumphantly. It establishes a history that supports your account. The night before the hearing, Harrison found Meredith in their bedroom, sorting through a box of her old journals. What are you looking for? He asked, sitting beside her on the floor. My voice, she replied, showing him a page dated from before she met Michael. I used to be so confident, so clear about what I wanted. Then gradually, his voice replaced mine in my head, until I couldn't tell the difference between his criticisms and my own thoughts. Then the real voices started. She closed the journal, looking up at Harrison with clear eyes. But tomorrow, it's my voice they'll hear, no one else's. The courtroom was less crowded this time, the media having moved on to fresher scandals, but the tension was no less palpable. Michael sat with his attorney, his normally composed facade showing cracks of strain. Claire was noticeably absent. His case unraveled spectacularly when their lawyer presented the evidence of his previous misconduct, corroborated by a surprise witness, Claire herself, who testified to Michael's obsessive behavior and manipulation. He told me Meredith was stalking him, she stated clearly, that she invented the pregnancy to trap him. But I've seen the medical records, the timeline. He lied to me just as he's lying to this court. When the judge dismissed the appeal, citing frivolous claims and evidence of continued harassment, Michael's mask finally slipped completely. He stood pointing at Meredith with shaking fury. You've ruined everything. You and that child, Meredith interrupted calmly, is your daughter, though you've never once acted like her, Father. Emma deserves better, and now she has it. The restraining order issued that day prohibited Michael from coming within 500 feet of Meredith, Emma, or the Mother's Haven Center. It was the final legal closure to a chapter that had caused so much pain. As they left the courthouse, Harrison took Meredith's hand. I'm so proud of you. The way you stood your ground in there, you were magnificent, she smiled, the spring sunshine illuminating her face. For the first time, I felt completely free of him, like the last shadow was finally gone. That evening, they celebrated not just their legal victory, but the first anniversary of Emma's arrival in their lives. Olivia, Regina, Dr. Helena, Sandra, and Rose, the circle of supporters who had become family, gathered in their home for a quiet dinner. As Emma toddled between the adults, now walking confidently and babbling a growing vocabulary, Harrison watched Meredith laughing with their friends. The transformation from the desperate young woman on the bridge to this confident, joyful person before him seemed nothing short of miraculous. Later, when their guests had gone and Emma was asleep, Harrison found Meredith standing by the crib, a thoughtful expression on her face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I was just remembering something my grandmother used to say. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need, even when it looks like everything is falling apart." Jimmy turned in his arms to face him. That morning on the bridge, I thought it was the end of everything. I never imagined it would be the beginning. Harrison kissed her gently. I was just looking for a walk to clear my head. I found my whole world instead. They stood there in the quiet nursery, watching their daughter sleep, marveling at the strange winding path that had brought them together. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and for once, the future stretched before them untroubled. By shadows of the past, the metropolitan Mother's Haven was celebrating its first anniversary, and the occasion called for a special gathering. What had begun as Harrison's vision to honor Meredith's struggle had blossomed into something far greater than either of them had anticipated. In just 1 year, the center had helped over 100 mothers in crisis situations, providing not just immediate assistance but long-term support for rebuilding their lives. The main hall had been decorated with photos documenting the center's journey, from the initial renovation to candid moments of mothers and children finding their footing again. Meredith stood before one particular photograph, showing her speaking to a group of women during their first support session. The determination in her eyes, the gentle confidence in her posture. It was a woman far removed from the broken soul Harrison had found on that bridge. "I still can't believe that's me sometimes," she said as Harrison approached, handing her a glass of sparkling cider. "I can," he replied, his voice warm with pride. That strength was always there. It just needed the right circumstances to emerge. The celebration brought together not just the staff and volunteers, but many of the families who had found help at the Haven. Children ran and played between clusters of adults, their laughter a testament to the healing that had taken place within these walls. Emma, now almost 2 years old, was in the thick of it, her dark curls bouncing as she chased after an older boy with a toy truck. "Mrs. Walker?" A hesitant voice drew their attention. A young woman stood nearby, cradling an infant no more than a few weeks old. "I just wanted to thank you. When I came here 3 months ago, I was thinking about." She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Meredith embraced her gently, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "But you didn't. You reached out instead, and that makes all the difference." As Meredith walked away to introduce the young mother to Dr. Helena, Harrison reflected on how, naturally, she had grown into her role as a beacon for others. The title Mrs. Walker still brought a smile to his face. They had married in a small ceremony 6 months earlier, with Emma as their flower girl and their circle of supporters as witnesses. The wedding had been Regina's idea. "You two are already a family in every way that matters," she had pointed out. "Why not make it official?" The simplicity of the event belied the profound journey it represented. From strangers thrust together by crisis to partners bound by choice and love. Harrison's phone buzzed with a message from Catherine, their lawyer, who couldn't attend the celebration. "Final paperwork filed today. Adoption officially complete. Congratulations, Dad." His heart swelled. Though he had been Emma's father in practice for over a year, the legal adoption marked the formal completion of their family. Michael had relinquished all parental rights, as part of a plea deal for the harassment charges, finally removing the last lingering threat to their stability. "Good news?" Olivia asked, noticing his emotional expression. She had transitioned from Harrison's secretary to the Haven's administrative director, bringing her organizational talents to bear on their expanding operations. "The best," he replied, showing her the message. "Emma is officially a Walker now." Olivia squeezed his arm affectionately. "As if there was ever any doubt. That child has had you wrapped around her finger since day one." The evening progressed with speeches and presentations. Sandra, who had become one of their strongest business supporters, announced a new scholarship program for mothers wanting to pursue education in finance or accounting. Dr. Helena shared promising statistics about the effectiveness of their holistic approach to maternal mental health. When it was Meredith's turn to speak, the room fell silent. She stood at the podium, looking more confident than Harrison had ever seen her. "2 years ago, I stood on a bridge convinced the world would be better without me in it," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. "I was wrong, not just about myself, but about how much we need each other. The Haven exists because one person chose to stop and help another. Everything we've built since then grew from that single act of compassion," she continued, outlining their plans for the coming year. A new satellite location in a neighboring district, expanded childcare hours, partnerships with local businesses for job placement. But beyond these practical measures, what we're really building is hope. A mother in despair can't see possibilities. I know this from my own experience. Our job is to hold that hope for her until she's strong enough to hold it herself, as applause filled the room. Harrison felt a tugging at his pants leg. Emma had wandered back to him, arms raised in the universal toddler sign for up. He lifted her and she immediately laid her head on his shoulder, thumb finding its way to her mouth, a sure sign she was reaching the limits of her energy. Meredith joined them moments later, her cheeks flushed with excitement and emotion. "I think someone's ready for bed," she said, stroking Emma's back. "I'll take her home," Harrison offered. "You should stay. Enjoy your night. This is your triumph." "Ours," she corrected him. "And I'd rather we all go together. The real celebration is what we've built as a family." Their home, once Harrison's sleek bachelor apartment, had transformed as much as they had. Colorful artwork adorned walls that were previously bare. Toys were organized in bins that nonetheless spilled their contents regularly across the living room floor. Photos chronicled their journey: Emma's first steps, Meredith's graduation ceremony, their wedding day. After tucking Emma into bed, they settled on the balcony where so many of their important conversations had taken place. The city sprawled before them, lights twinkling against the night sky. "I've been thinking," Meredith said, nestling against Harrison's side. "Maybe it's time we look for a house, something with a yard where Emma can play." Leaving the city, the idea would have been unthinkable to the Harrison of 2 years ago. whose identity had been so entangled with his urban corporate lifestyle. Not too far, just somewhere with more space to grow. She looked up at him meaningfully. In case our family expands someday. Harrison's heart skipped. They had discussed the possibility of more children, but always as a distant future consideration. Are you saying? Not yet, she laughed softly. But I'm ready to start thinking about it. Emma would be an amazing big sister. He pulled her closer, marveling at how far they had come. From a desperate rescue on a stormy morning to planning a future filled with more children and a home with a yard. It was a journey neither could have imagined. A house it is then, he agreed. Somewhere Emma can run, and we can build whatever comes next together. The following weekend found them driving through residential neighborhoods, Emma secured in her car seat, happily pointing at dogs and trees as they passed. Their real estate agent, a friend of Olivia's, had arranged several viewings of properties that might suit their evolving needs. The third house they visited captured their attention immediately. Set back from a quiet street, the Victorian home had been recently renovated but maintained its historic charm. A wraparound porch offered a view of the sizable backyard, where mature trees provided shade over a grassy area perfect for play. They toured the interior. Harrison could see Meredith mentally placing their life within these walls. Emma's toys in the sunny room that would be her bedroom, family meals in the spacious kitchen, quiet evenings in the study lined with built-in bookshelves. There's something special about this place, she said as they stood in what would be their bedroom, overlooking the garden. It feels like home, Harrison finished for her. It was true. Despite having only stepped through the door 30 minutes ago, the house already felt more like home than his apartment ever had. While the agent took a call in another room, Meredith pulled Harrison to the window. Look, she whispered, pointing to the yard below. Emma had discovered a small flower garden and was crouched beside it, gently touching a bright red bloom with one finger. Rose, who had accompanied them to watch Emma during the house tours, knelt beside her, apparently explaining something about the flower. I want this for her, Meredith said softly. A place with gardens and trees, somewhere she can put down roots just like we have. Harrison nodded, understanding completely. Then let's make it happen. The process of buying the house and selling. The apartment moved with surprising speed. Within 2 months, they were unpacking boxes in their new home, Emma helping by carrying her stuffed animals one by one to her new bedroom, insisting on their proper placement on her bed. On their first night, after Emma was asleep, Harrison and Meredith walked through the quiet house, still somewhat in awe that this space was theirs to fill with life and memories. I never thought I'd have this, Meredith admitted as they stood in the kitchen surrounded by half-unpacked dishes. A home, a family, a purpose. When I was at my lowest, I couldn't imagine ever feeling safe again, let alone happy. Harrison took her hands, still marveling at how far they had come. You built this, Meredith. Your strength, your determination to heal, your willingness to help others despite everything you've been through. You amaze me every day. She shook her head, smiling. We built it together. That's the whole point. Neither of us could have done this alone. As they settled into their new routine, the haven continued to flourish. Meredith divided her time between working with the mothers there and completing her accounting degree. Harrison had restructured his company to allow him more family time while still maintaining oversight of key operations. Emma attended a preschool program 3 mornings a week, blossoming in both vocabulary and independence. Their circle expanded too. Neighbors became friends, particularly a couple down the street with twins Emma's age. The children played while the adults shared coffee. On weekend mornings, trading stories and advice. It was a simple pleasure Harrison had never known he was missing. Community, connection beyond professional networks. Dr. Helena, who still met with Meredith monthly more as a mentor than a psychiatrist now, remarked on the transformation during one of her visits. When I first met you both, I hoped for recovery and stability, she said, watching Emma show off her new puzzle skills. But what you've created goes so far beyond that. You've turned trauma into purpose, fear into compassion. We had help. Meredith pointed out. So much help. Yes, but not everyone receives help so gracefully or pays it forward so generously. On a crisp autumn morning, exactly 2 years after that fateful day on the bridge, Harrison woke early. The house was quiet, dawn just beginning to illuminate the garden outside their bedroom window. Beside him, Meredith slept peacefully, her face relaxed in a way that still sometimes surprised him when he remembered the haunted expression she had worn when they first met. He slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake her. Today was special, not just because of the anniversary it marked, but because of what it represented. A complete circle, a journey from desperation to hope, from isolation to family. Harrison made his way to Emma's room, finding her already awake, sitting in her bed surrounded by stuffed animals engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation. "Good morning, sweetheart," he whispered. "Are your friends having a meeting?" Emma looked up with a grin that never failed to melt his heart. At just over 2 years old, she was a bundle of energy and curiosity, her dark curls and expressive eyes reminiscent of her mother, though there was no denying Michael's contribution to her features. But that thought no longer brought the twist of discomfort it once had. Emma was theirs in every way that mattered, biology being the least of the connections that bound them together. "Daddy Bear's hungry," she announced, holding up her favorite teddy. "Well, let's get the bears some breakfast then, shall we?" He lifted her into his arms, breathing in the sweet, sleep-warm scent of her hair. "But first, we have a special project to help Mommy." Downstairs in the kitchen, Harrison sat Emma in her high chair with some cereal while he began preparing breakfast. It wasn't often he had the opportunity to surprise Meredith. Her intuition was too keen, her connection to both him and Emma too deep to miss the subtle shifts in mood that usually signaled a surprise in the making. But today he had planned carefully, coordinating with their friends to create a day of reflection and celebration. The kitchen table was soon covered with Emma's artwork, colorful scribbles she had created with his help over the past week, each page representing a moment in their journey. There were stick figures holding hands, bright suns, houses with impossibly tall chimneys, and Emma's interpretation of her family, 3 blobs of different sizes surrounded by what looked like a rainbow. Harrison was arranging these masterpieces, alongside photo albums, when he heard Meredith's footsteps on the stairs. Emma heard too, squealing, "Mommy," and attempting to wriggle out of her chair. "What's all this?" Meredith asked, entering the kitchen in her robe, hair tousled from sleep but eyes bright with curiosity. "We're making a memory map," Harrison explained, lifting Emma from her chair so she could run to her mother. "Of everything that brought us here." Understanding dawned on Meredith's face as she realized the significance of the date. 2 years, she said softly, lifting Emma into her arms. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes like another lifetime altogether. We thought," Harrison gestured between himself and Emma, "that today should be about celebrating the journey. All of it, even the hardest parts. Because without them, we wouldn't be here." Meredith's eyes glistened as she took in the display on the table. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." After breakfast, they dressed warmly and drove to the river, to the bridge where it had all begun. It was a pilgrimage they had discussed but never undertaken, both feeling some trepidation about revisiting the site of such trauma. But today felt right. A reclaiming of space that had once held only fear and desperation. The bridge looked different in the clear autumn light than it had in that stormy dawn 2 years earlier. Trees along the riverbank had turned golden and red, their reflections wavering in the gentle current below. A few joggers passed, nodding friendly greetings, unaware of the profound significance this ordinary structure held for the family standing at its center. Emma, bundled in a little red coat, was fascinated by the water below, pointing and chattering. "River, Mommy, big water." "Yes, sweetheart," Meredith replied, her voice steady despite the emotions Harrison knew must be coursing through her. "This is a very special river." They walked slowly to the spot where Harrison had found the basket. Nothing marked it as different from any other section of the bridge, yet they both knew without discussing it exactly where to stop. "I was so lost," Meredith said quietly, gazing down at the water. "I truly believed I was saving her, that this was the only way to protect her. The voices were so loud, so convincing." Harrison put his arm around her. Emma balanced on his other hip. "But part of you knew better. You tied that basket securely enough that it didn't fall immediately. You chose a time and place where someone might find her. I think I was hoping someone would find us both," she admitted. "Even through the psychosis, some part of me was crying out for help, not oblivion." Emma, sensing the seriousness of the moment despite not understanding its meaning, laid her small hand against Meredith's cheek. "Mommy sad?" Meredith caught the tiny hand, kissing it gently. "No, sweetheart, Mommy is happy, so very happy to be here with you and Daddy." They stood in silence for a few moments more, each lost in their own reflections. Then, in a gesture they had planned together, Meredith took a small paper boat from her pocket, one they had folded the night before, and placed it gently on the water below. On it they had written all the fears and pain they were releasing. Guilt, shame, isolation, abandonment. The current caught it, carrying it downstream and out of sight. "Ready for the next stop?" Harrison asked when the boat had disappeared around a bend in the river. Their journey continued to the hospital, where both Meredith and Emma had been treated, though they didn't go inside. Instead, they visited the small garden in the courtyard, where a plaque had recently been installed recognizing the Metropolitan Mother's Haven's partnership with the hospital's maternal mental health program. "From patients to partners," Harrison read aloud, tracing the engraved words with his finger. It had been Meredith's initiative to create a direct pipeline between the hospital and their center, ensuring that mothers experiencing postpartum depression or psychosis would immediately be connected with support services rather than falling through the cracks as she had. Their final stop before lunch was the Mother's Haven itself. Though it wasn't typically open on Sundays, today was an exception. As they pulled into the parking lot, Meredith gasped in surprise. Dozens of cars were already there, and a banner hung over the entrance. 2 years of new beginnings. "Did you know about this?" she asked Harrison, who couldn't suppress his grin any longer. "Maybe," he admitted, "but it wasn't my idea. The staff and the mothers organized it themselves. Inside, the center had been transformed. Photos documenting the Haven's history covered the walls, alongside artwork created by the children who had found safety there. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and in the center of the main room, a large cake bore the imprint of dozens of colorful handprints, the mothers and children who had been touched by the Haven's work. Regina was the first to greet them, embracing Meredith warmly. "We couldn't let this day pass without celebrating what you've built here," she said, taking Emma from Harrison's arms for a cuddle. "What we've all built," Meredith corrected her, looking around at the gathering crowd. Sandra was there with her new husband. Dr. Helena chatted with Rose near the refreshment table. Olivia and her daughter Zoe, now a confident teenager, were helping younger children with a craft activity. Even Claire, Michael's ex-wife, who had become an unexpected ally, stood talking with Catherine. One by one, they came to share stories of how the Haven had impacted their lives. A young mother who had been homeless showed photos of her new apartment. Another who had arrived barely able to make eye contact now confidently described the college courses she was taking. Children who had witnessed abuse were playing freely, their laughter the strongest testimony to healing. When it came time for speeches, Harrison expected Meredith might be overwhelmed, but she stepped forward with the quiet confidence that had become her hallmark. 2 years ago today, I stood at the lowest point of my life, she began, her voice clear and steady. I was convinced there was no way forward, no hope left. I was wrong. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those gathered. Each of you has been part of the bridge that carried me from that darkness to where I stand today. Some of you found me at my worst, her eyes lingered on Harrison, and saw possibilities I couldn't yet imagine. Others walked alongside me as I learned to trust myself again. And some of you, she smiled at the mothers seated in the front row, showed me that my story could help light the way for others. Emma had toddled back to her during the speech, wrapping herself around Meredith's legs in a gesture both possessive and protective. Meredith lifted her, settling her on her hip without breaking stride. The haven exists because we recognize that no one should have to walk through the valley alone. Whether the darkness comes from mental illness, poverty, abuse, or isolation, the antidote is the same: community. Hands reaching out to guide us back to ourselves. As applause filled the room, Harrison felt a familiar tightness in his chest. That mixture of pride, love, and lingering amazement at how completely his life had been transformed. The man he had been 2 years ago, sleepwalking through a successful but hollow existence, seemed like a stranger now. After the celebration, they returned home, Emma falling asleep in the car after the excitement of the day. Harrison carried her to her bed, lingering to watch her peaceful sleep, sending up a silent prayer of gratitude for the miracle of her presence in their lives. He found Meredith in their bedroom, sitting cross-legged on the bed surrounded by the photo albums and children's artwork they had looked at that morning. She had added the new photos from the day's journey, creating a visual narrative of their past, present, and future. "Come see." She patted the bed beside her. "I've been thinking about what to tell Emma when she's older, and asks about how we became a family. I want her to know the whole story, even the hard parts, but in a way that shows her how loved she's always been." Harrison settled beside her, examining the carefully arranged pages. "It's perfect," he said, echoing her words from that morning. "Honest, but full of hope." "Like us," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, flipping through the images of their life together. The early, tentative days of Harrison learning to care for an infant. Meredith's first supervised visits with Emma. The gradual blossoming of their unconventional family. Their wedding day, with Emma as flower girl, moving into their new home. And now, today's journey of remembrance and celebration. "I have something for you," Harrison said, reaching into his nightstand drawer. He pulled out a small velvet box, not unlike the one that had held Meredith's engagement ring. A token of these 2 years. Inside was a delicate silver charm bracelet. Each charm represented a milestone in their journey. A bridge, a heart, a tiny house, a book symbolizing Meredith's return to education, an infinity symbol for their marriage, and in the center, a perfect miniature of Emma's first handprint. "Oh, Harrison," she breathed, tears welling in her eyes as she touched each charm. "It's us, our whole story." "With room to add more," he pointed out, clasping it around her wrist, "because we're just getting started." Meredith examined the bracelet in the soft lamplight, then looked up at him with eyes full of love and certainty. "You know what amazes me most about our story? Not that we survived the darkest times, though that's miraculous enough. It's that we found such joy on the other side. Real, everyday, ordinary joy." Harrison knew exactly what she meant. The happiness they had built wasn't the fleeting high of romance novels or movie endings. It was solid, sustainable, made of mourning. Coffee shared while Emma babbled about her dreams, of household chores divided without discussion, of knowing glances across rooms full of people, of silent support during difficult days, and of quiet celebrations of small victories. "That's the best kind," he agreed, pulling her close. "The kind that lasts." Outside their window, the last light of day painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the nursery down the hall, Emma slept surrounded by the stuffed animals she insisted needed to share her bed. Throughout their home, evidence of their life together, photographs, children's toys, books, the day's mail, created a tapestry of ordinary moments that together formed an extraordinary life. 2 years earlier, a moment of crisis had connected 3 lost souls on a bridge over troubled waters. Today, healed and whole, they had built not just a bridge but a home, a sanctuary where love had transformed tragedy into triumph, where the echoes of the past no longer haunted, but instead reminded them of how far they had come. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, Meredith and Harrison held each other close, grateful for the journey behind them and filled with hope for the path ahead, a path they would walk together with Emma between them, hands joined and hearts aligned, into whatever future awaited. In the end, this was the miracle that had emerged from that stormy morning. Not just that lives had been saved, but that they had been transformed. Not just that wounds had healed, but that they had become sources of strength and compassion. Not just that a family had been formed, but that its love now rippled outward, touching countless other lives through the haven and beyond. And in this, the final chapter of their beginning, they rested in the certainty that though their story had started in darkness, it would continue in light, a light they had kindled together and would keep burning, come what may, for all the days to come.